Chicken cock, chicken. This is gonna be fun. Established in 1856 in Paris, Kentucky, a town tucked away in the heart of Bourbon County, the original chicken cock American whiskey rose to popularity during the 19th century. James A. Miller built a distillery and started making chicken cock, a type of whiskey unique to the bluegrass region. Unfortunately, the original distillery where chicken cock was made burned down in the 1950s. Well, the brand has been resurrected, and aside from some high-priced special releases, there are two offerings I always see sitting on the shelf. It's a bourbon and a rye. They got a high price tag. Let's try them on What's on the Shelf Wednesday. Alright guys, so a little bit of history about chicken cock. Just a few years after he founded chicken cock, James A. Miller died, leaving behind a few $1,000s to a trusted distillery clerk and a high-quality whiskey brand that was still in its infancy. The clerk was a man named George G. White, who continued the chicken cock whiskey brand and made it the legend it became back in the day. Fast forward to 1880, White changed the name of the distillery to G.G. White Distillery. While the name changed, the bourbon remained the same, and White continued to pay homage to James A. Miller by renaming the spirit itself to the Old J.A. Miller Chicken Cock. In 1889, chicken cock was so popular, White discovered an imitation brand, Miller's Gamecock Bourbon out of Boston. They pretty much copied everything from the name to the label design. So White took action. A circuit court of Massachusetts ruled in White's favor in a trademark infringement suit. While the brand was being copied, grain economies were strong and thriving during this time, and as whiskey continued to gain popularity, distilleries popped up across the nation. Unfortunately, as you guys know, here came the rectifiers. These guys added things like prune juice, other alcohols, tobacco spit, and sometimes battery acid to their products to try to pass them off as bourbon, which led to Congress successfully passing the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897, a stamp that would signify a high-quality bourbon product. Prohibition came along in 1920, and while large distilleries were able to utilize a legal loophole to sell their spirits for medicinal purposes at pharmacies, the process was too expensive for many smaller distilleries, and as we all know, a lot of those distilleries closed, and J.A. Miller Chicken Cock Whiskey was one of them. They were acquired by a larger foreign conglomerate called Distillers Corporation Limited of Montreal in Canada, purchased legal rights to the chicken cock name, and they began production outside of the U.S. Toward the end of Prohibition, chicken cock whiskey changed hands again. The American Medicinal Spirits Company, owned by National Distillers, trademarked the brand and sold it for medicinal use. After Prohibition ended, there was a push for the revival of chicken cock whiskey. National Distillers poured efforts into advertising, attempting to bring it back to its pre-Prohibition glory, but it didn't really work, and by the 1950s, the brand just faded away. In 2011, chicken cock's fortune changed when spirits entrepreneur Matty Antila discovered the brand while researching the early days of distillation in the U.S. Antila decided that the famous old brand was worthy of a rebirth, so he began buying the best aged bourbons he could find and explore the market for old relics left over from the days when chicken cock was one of the country's best known brands. So the initial release for chicken cock, when it was brought back, they released 30 barrels of an 8-year-old bourbon in 2017 as a limited edition 160th anniversary single barrel. After the success of that one, Chicken Cock revealed a second limited release in October 2018, which was a 10-year double barrel bourbon, and then we got a 15-year bourbon last year, which was part of all that tote whiskey that was supposedly sourced from Jim Beam that Chicken Cock also released as well. And a real smart move, I think, by Chicken Cock was in September of 2018, Bardstown Bourbon Company announced that Grain and Barrel Spirits, the makers of chicken cock whiskey, had joined their collaborative distilling program. So basically, Bardstown Bourbon Company is contract distilling for Grain and Barrel Spirits, which is about 78 miles away in Paris, Kentucky. All right, so for full transparency here, guys, Chicken Cock sent me these bottles to review and to try for you guys. So I just wanted to give you a quick background of the history. I really do dig the kind of the nostalgic look and feel of the bottles. So I think first we're going to start with the bourbon. So their bourbon is a blend of two mash bills. There's a younger mash bill in there that's 78 corn, 12% rye, and 10% malted barley. The older mash bill is 74% corn, 18% rye, and 8% malted barley. It's 90 proof, but retails for about 60 bucks. It does say straight on it, so you know it's at least 2 years old. So let's go into the nose and let's see how this goes. Here we go. Little chicken cock for everybody. It's got a nice nose. It's got a lot of vanilla, a lot of orange. Yeah, there's a really beautiful citrus punch here. Spicy. It's also minty as well. Get some like caramel in there. Caramel. I gotta start saying that right. Shit. It's a little nutty too. It actually reminds me a little bit of like a Beam profile to it. Not saying it's, I mean, it's not Jim Beam, but it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. It's very, like some of the high, like if you're talking about like Old Grandad, something like that, if I'm trying to think of something it reminds me of, I think Old Grandad is kind of close. Yeah, it's definitely a nuttiness quality to it. But yeah, I think the qualities here that are coming out, you get your vanilla, your caramel. I think you get a nice punch of citrus, which is probably the shining star, maybe a hint of cherry, and that nuttiness. Here we go, let's try it. Man, it's got a really nice finish on it for a 90 proofer, I'll tell you that. The spice really comes through. Again, that could be a mix of the mash bill and also maybe some of the youth quality to it. Second sip, more of the traditional vanilla caramel notes really come out. Brown sugars, little creme brulee type thing going on, but not so much the citrus punch that I was getting on the nose is starting to take a back seat. And man, does this have a nice spice for 90 proof. The finish on this might be probably the shining star of this experience so far. All right, so quick fact, guys. You know, I mentioned Paris, Kentucky, where chicken cock is originally from. The first known advertisement for bourbon was printed in the Western Citizen newspaper in Paris, Kentucky. It was in 1821. The firm of Stout and Adams debuted the word bourbon in an advertising offering barrels of whiskey for sale. So just kind of a fun, you know, little history nugget there. Bourbon's good. Man, they want 60 bucks for this. I think that's the biggest problem with the bourbon is the price point. Chicken cock has always been on the higher end of price points. I feel like you can get this experience, even though it's a 90 proofer and drink spicy. Man, I feel like for old, like you could buy Old Grandad 114 for $20-something and get a similar experience than what you're getting here out of the bourbon. All right, let's try the rye. So the rye is a 95.5, you know, mash bill, at least 2 years old since it is straight rye whiskey, also 90 proof, and this is 70 bucks. Remember, this isn't sourced from NGP. This is a Bardstown Bourbon Company 95.5 rye, which I've tasted, and it is a little bit different than the NGP stuff that you might have had in the past. So, man, that is just spearmint, minty, piney, black pepper. It's a touch sweeter than I think the typical 95.5 rye than you would get out of MGP. There's just a hint of some more like vanillas and caramels coming out of this one. I mean, this is a Kentucky rye, even though it's 95.5, you're looking at a Kentucky rye, which is generally a little bit sweeter than an Indiana rye. Man, hint of like black licorice and like a sweet tobacco note I'm getting on this. The rye nose is actually really nice on this this whiskey. You get that citrus punch of getting more of like a lemon rind on this. Nice note. Both of these whiskeys have great noses. So let's try it. Man, I feel like I'm just drinking a cup of lemon tea with some cinnamon in it, some spice, definitely some honey. That's a nice rye. Man, this is like literally drinking a cup of tea. I just get black tea, honey, maybe some lemon, like a lemon zinger tea. I mean, overall, it's a really nice rye. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either of these products except the price point. Yeah, and the more sips you take of the rye, the less spicy it gets. It becomes a really, really easy sipping rye at the 90 proof point. And you just get all those tea forward notes. You know, to me personally, a lot of the, like I said, the orange, honey, lemon, like, you know, black tea flavor. Not really getting the licorice or anything on the palate. It is, again, both of them, I think, give a great, nice, long finish. These would be two bottles that I wouldn't mind drinking and buying. I just feel like the price point is what hurts them. This is $60 here in Ohio, and this is $70. And these are young products. Now, Chicken Cock, again, has always been on the high side of everything they do. Like when they released a 15-year bourbon last year, that was part of that 78.5 corn mash bill that was coming out all over the place. They were charging $250 for theirs when other folks were charging $120 to $130. So they always seem to be on the higher side. And I think for them to make any real headway, and while their products might be popular, I do, again, I could appreciate the nostalgic like flair to their bottles and their design and the history of it. But there's too many bottles now on the shelf that can easily go head to head with both of these that are way cheaper. I think if you're going to ask people to pay these prices, the liquid in the bottles need to be older. I think if anyone's watching, they need to reduce their prices a little bit, make them more accessible. These are always just sitting on the shelf here in Ohio. The price for them, what they're charging, does not warrant the price points that they're asking. So hopefully down the line, their stuff can get older, their prices get a little bit cheaper to compete, and then we might have something. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review for What's on the Shelf Wednesday for Chicken Cock Rye and Chicken Cock Bourbon. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the subscribe button below. Please hit the like button. If you haven't yet, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter. Let me know if you've had these two, what you think of it. Leave any suggestions down in the comments for an upcoming What's on the Shelf Wednesday series episode. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. So cheers. I'm going to take another sip of the rye. Take care, everybody.